So for my project, well, basically starting at upcycling. You guys can all see this, or I can scroll through.
Yeah, I can see it.
Basically starting at upcycling, I searched through my junk drawer. Like, what do I see in my junk drawer? I'm usually the person that like throws trash away, so I don't have a lot of crap sitting around. So I just kind of searched through. I found like half-used bottles of silicone, broken colored pencils, paper, batteries, like stupid random crap. So I was like, what can I do with these broken colored pencils ends? And I started going online. I can't see my screen.
Can you close that door to this? Because some people talking on it. It's kind of hard to hear.
If you make it full screen, that
There they are.
Full screen. Just a little bit. Anyway, so I started looking online. I found these. I looked up. If you search colored pencil sculpture on Google, like you start seeing a lot of really cool. Like this guy made some mountainscape somehow. This guy made a face. There's like gorillas, flowers, candle holders. There's all sorts of really cool like sculptures that people have made with colored pencils. And I saw these earrings, and I'm like, cool. That's like more on my ability level. Like I could actually cast these things parallel to each other and like turn it into something, right? So at first I figured I would just kind of cast them up and cut them into shape. So I wanted to make like a sphere, a cube, and maybe like a pyramid, and just kind of like cut them and have these like colored pencils floating in this clear matrix. And I just thought it would look really cool. But I did this test run. So I basically made a mold out of silicone. Here, I'll pass this one around. That's half of it at least. So I filled up this mold with the resin. It's called like Easy Mold or something. It was just a 1-to-1 mold. And I filled it up and I put the pencils in thinking they would like sit there, and they just floated to the top. I was like, okay, cool. Like how the hell am I supposed to make these things like stay where I want them to? Because they float. And I should have seen it coming because wood is not very dense and it floats in like everything. So I did that. I took that and then I cut it in half. That was one half. This next half is the half that I like sanded down, just so I could see what would happen when I sanded it. Because at first I figured I could like cut them and then sand it back to like super clear, because it dries like super hard clear. Here, I can pass this one around. That's like the base I made for my cube, I guess I'll call it. It dries really clear, it dries really hard. It's super easy to work with, but it's like, how do I get things to stay there? So what I ended up, rather than just going down this path and trying to make shapes, because getting them to stay there is like nearly impossible. So getting them to stay was really hard. So rather than try to make shapes, what I did was I just took these ends of colored pencils and glued them into, I don't have that picture up. I glued them into a pyramid and with super glue, and then I tried to cast that pyramid, so you guys can pass this around too. That was like my final product. And so one side, like I knew it would float. So instead of putting it in there and like letting it rise to the top and dry that way, I like put it in there and I hung it. Do I have this picture yet? No, the report's not quite there. Let's see, so I hung it like this. So that was just the pyramid, and I hung it with a zip tie on my Lego mold. So I made a mold out of Legos. And so I made this like square cube, right? And then I coated the inside with silicone so the plastic mold stuff wouldn't stick to the Legos. And then I like put the pyramid down in there and filled up the bottom with like 3/4 of an inch of this resin material and just hung it with a zip tie so it would like not sink anymore, and let that harden. And once it was hard, then I took this zip tie out and took that boom off and just filled it the rest of the way up so it would like stay down. Right, and so then I had this like clear, mostly cube shape, but I still wanted to make it like smooth on the edges. So I took the test and I started sanding and realized that once I sanded it, it just like made this foggy white color, and it kind of turns into like, it almost looks like ice, if you can see that. It's really interesting. But on the top, the very top side, I didn't have to sand because it was flat, because of gravity, right? And so I just like kind of sanded the edges to make it look like this nice window, so you can still see completely into the cube, but it's smooth on all the sides. It's not necessarily clear. It wasn't the aesthetic I was going for, but I think it turned out really good. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of testing. Like, I had no idea how to work with this material. I don't know if any of you guys have casted anything in this clear resin material, but it's like really not that easy. So the final, it kind of looks like this. I just took, so the base has colored pencil, like the lead, the shavings, and then obviously the wood that's around the side. So like as I sharpened down the tips of those pencils in the pyramid, I just saved some of like the trash and put that back in. But I found like the tips sank, the shavings floated, and like there was all sorts of like, I couldn't find a material that just like was neutrally buoyant inside of it. And so I just kind of like used them both. This, I did a couple of different layers. So I casted the bottom, I let the shavings sink to the bottom, let it harden, and then I poured more resin and put the wood shavings in and let those float to the top and let it harden that way. So I had this like two-way little stand. The other problem I had was, so I wanted to stand on its corner. That's why that flat corner is flat. But in sanding it, like, I couldn't hold it still enough while I like sanded to make one face on the corner. So there's like two faces on that corner, so it's a little imbalanced, but I think the imperfections in this little stand like kind of aid it in standing. So yeah, I kind of was going for like an elegant effect because I was hoping it would just be completely clear, but because it's not, I'm not really sure what the aesthetic I achieved was or is. But I like it. It was fun. I would definitely do it again. I only spent like probably like $10 overall. Like I still have a whole bunch of this clear material left that I want to like do stuff with, but this was probably the most clever idea I came up with for sure. So yeah, any questions?
So the like foggy surface you got off by sanding it, is that right?
Yeah, so basically all the sides were clear. You can see on this guy the texture of the bottom.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what the texture of all of the sides were
Okay.
before. So that's like just the silicone. I kind of like put silicone down and like smeared it with my finger. And yeah, just to make the mold, just to make this like clear face. Because I had like a half-used bottle of silicone. I actually had some bolts on my bike that were like shaking, and as I would ride, I would hear them vibrate, and it was driving me nuts. So I went and bought some silicone and like just put it around the bolts to like keep them fixed. And then I had this whole bottle of silicone that's just sitting there. So I just like layer by layer made a, like I did a circle like on this one. I guess I did a square, and then I let it dry, and then I did another square and let it dry, and just like stacked up this layer. And so that's that texture you see on the outside, but it didn't stick. So that was like, for that test at least, I learned that the silicone didn't stick to the material. And then I also learned that I should build my mold better, because it took forever to like build that, you know. So I was like, oh, Legos, let's do that. And got a little farther. Yeah. Any other questions?
How did you do this like corner thing? That's really cool.
So like that was in my test, it just like didn't, like the pencils floated, so you can see they're at the top on this side and they're clear on the bottom. And I just kind of like let them like fall onto each other and do their thing. And then I just went to the shop and took, it was a square. So this was,
Oh, you cut it.
this was like this.
Gotcha.
Boom, like that, right? So I just cut it in half and then sanded this down. So that's, it looked like this before it was that,
Nice.
right?
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it
Like,
looks
you just-
really sweet. I like the aesthetic. At first I wanted to go for that aesthetic with like the wood and the circles of color coming out, and like those color pencils in particular were like colored pencils, so it turned out really cool. And that was kind of what I was going for in the first place, but as I did more testing and realized like how hard they were to work with, and I was like running out of colored pencils as I was doing this, just like slowly you break off ends and sharpen them, you like left less and less and less. I just had to like pick something and go for it. And so I ended up with this, which was not as much material, but I don't know, kind of looks like an ice cube.
How long did the resin take to dry?
So I read this thing, and it was the more mass you have, the faster it dries, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, so when I did the really thin layer, it took like 24 hours, at least this guy. But that big one, I could touch it after like 5 hours. It was really weird, yeah. But it said 48 hours full cure, so I just kind of let it do its thing. Yeah.
for the for your inspiration pictures, did you ever like find out how they're actually able to get the colored pencils to stay together?
No, there's no, I couldn't find artists, I couldn't, like, all this was super vague. It was literally Google Images, colored pencil sculpture, and like, this is what pops up. So yeah, I don't know, and I don't know how they got it clear either.
Yeah.
Like, as I'm doing this more, I'm thinking that you would have to like build your mold perfectly, and then like put it all in there and just like let it do its thing. Because as soon as I sanded it, like I used 800 grit sandpaper, and it still wouldn't. It's not clear. It's really smooth, but it's not clear. And so I'm like, I don't know, or maybe get some like chemical substance that like melts the outside layer and just like re-solidifies to clear. But like that, now we're talking like money, and it's not an upcycle, and like down the line, I'm like, I can't put any resources into this, so I just stopped. But yeah, I kind of wanted to make like a couple of die to like play board games with. But I figured if you wanted to put stuff in it, they'd get weighted, and you would just like roll the same numbers all the time. So yeah. Any other questions?
Good.
Good, sweet.